well into the pre-calculus. So, let's get to it. Here's the idea. Someone was bored, and they decided what would be a good math problem. And then they found one. So, how much is a nickel worth?
5. 10.
5.
5. How much is a dime worth?
10.
10. So, if I have 5 nickels and 2 dimes, how much is it worth?
Oh, it's going to be a good lesson.
45.
That's 20, 30, 45
Oh,
cents,
yeah.
right? And how many total do I have?
What?
How many coins total do I have? 7 coins total, right? So, it's easy to go from knowing the number of coins and what they're worth to how much it's worth and how many coins we have. But, what if the problem asks us to go the other way? Uh-oh. What if someone tells us that we have a bunch of coins and they are worth, in this case, let's say, they are worth $1.95. And we have 28 coins that are nickels and dimes. How many nickels do I have? And how many dimes do I have?
I'm sorry, what?
I have 28 coins, nickels and dimes, and they add up to make $1.95. How many of each do I have?
Hold on.
Exactly, you must use algebra. Woo! So, I know, right? Now I do have some students who are like, 1 nickel, 27 dimes. Oh, that doesn't work. 1 nickel, or 2 nickels, 26 dimes. They usually get it wrong, even though they write out all the possibilities. So, I would encourage you not to do that. Also, you will fail later on when these problems get harder.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, because then we add quarters, nickels, and dimes, and then you just lose. So, how do we do this problem properly using algebra? Here's how we do it. We're going to call the number of nickels n. Your book's going to do number of nickels. I am lazy, where they do n. I, instead, I'm just going to do n for nickels. And the number of dimes is, your book's going to say ND, but we're just going to use D. So you don't have to write all the subscripts, you can just do N and D. Sound good? So, how many nickels do you have?
I don't know.
30.
How many?
N.
N.
Should I point in your general direction? Should I go like this? No, I want like this. How many? Look at the board. What does it say next to the number of nickels? N. And how many dimes do I have? Everybody? D. That's correct. Sierra's like the loudest one back there. Come on, guys. How many dimes do we have?
D.
D. Dimes. Okay. And nickels. D dimes. Now, I have a difficult question for you.
The cycle.
What is the value of all of the nickels I have? Value. How much is it worth? If I have n nickels, well, let's do this. If I have 2 nickels, how much are they worth? 10 cents. Why? Because you did 2 times 5. Okay, if I have 10 nickels, how much is it worth? 50 cents. Why? Because you did 10 times 5. So what's the value of n nickels?
N equals.
Nope. No equals. Just give me the value.
Value nickel is 10.
Times 5. Multiplied by 5. Multiply everything.
I have n nickels. N nickels. Each nickel is worth how many cents? 5. So what is the value of all of those nickels?
5.
5.
N.
5n. 5 times n. Why? Because if I have 1 nickel, I multiply 5 times 1, and that gives me how much it's worth. If I have 1,000 nickels, I multiply 5 times 1,000, and that gives me how much it's worth. So we'll multiply 5, which is the value of 1 nickel, times n, the number of nickels we have. Follow-up question, what's the value of all the dimes? If we have d dimes, Sierra, what's the value of all of the dimes? 10d. 10d. Okay, and now, based on these 4 pieces of information, we are going to write 2 equations. The first equation is the number equation. Okay? It's simple. They've given us the total number. So I am going to add the number of nickels, n, plus the number of dimes, d, and that equals 28. Do we agree? If we have n nickels and we have d dimes, and our total number of coins is 28, then n plus d should equal 28.
I was waiting for you.
Some good writing going on here. So we use that piece of information. Check. What's the other piece of information they give us? That all of them are worth $1.95. So if I take the value of nickels, how much they're worth, 5n, and I add that to the value of dimes, 10d, that gives me the total amount that everything is worth, which is, now watch this, this is tricky, not 1.95. It is worth 195, because we're talking about cents, so you always have to do it in cents. So instead of $1.95, it would be 195 cents. So we have 2 equations, n plus d equals 28, and we have 5n plus 10d equals 195. Can we solve that? Well, actually, they've been giving you these problems on your homework for weeks. Right? That nn plus nd equals 28, and 5nn plus 10nd equals 195. They've been giving them to you every single day for a long time, just for such a time as this. So hopefully you are putting in your due diligence, working hard, understanding how to do this correctly, not just copying the answer out of the back of the book. And as you've done that, you look at this and you go, shh, easy. How should we solve this? Substitution or elimination? Everybody? Elimination. What am I going to multiply the first one by? Now I'm lazy. I'm lazy. So what's easier to multiply by? 5 or 10? 10. Because 5, I have to think. 10, I just add a 0. So I'm going to multiply the first equation by negative 10. So I have negative 10n minus 10d equals negative 280. Then when I add the 2 equations together, I will eliminate the d. So I have negative 5n equals whatever 195 minus 280, which is negative 85. Finally, I can divide by negative 5 on both sides, and I get n equals 17. Now, if I have 17 nickels, how many dimes would I need? Well, they have to add up to 28, so dimes equals 11. So I have 11 dimes and 17 nickels. So we're taking that original problem I gave and going backwards. Problem? Well, yeah, it's a math problem.
It is very big.
Problem.
All right, let's try another one. AJ
Yes, sir.
has $4. No, Evan, sorry, he runs the snack shop. Evan has $4.45
Actually, we got $10.
in quarters and dimes. Uh-oh,
Evan.
this one's harder.
I really know.
Evan has 8 more quarters than dimes. Do we know how to write that equation?
$2 and then
8 more quarters than dimes.
equals.
Has $4.45 in quarters and dimes, and has 8 more quarters than dimes. So, can we write our 2 equations? Our first equation is going to be the number of things equation. So, the number of quarters I will call what? Q. The number of dimes I will call what, Riley? D. So, how do I write? You are not Riley. You are AJ. I will call this one AJ. AJ. So, how do I write that there's 8 more quarters than dimes? Now, this is where a lot of students will be tricked. Here's how I suggest you do it. Pretend like they're equal. The number of quarters equals the number of dimes. Then, which side do we add 8 to? Do I want quarters plus 8 equals dimes? Or do I want dimes plus 8 equals quarters? Which one's going to give me the bigger number as quarters? Think it through. Think it through. Think it through. If it helps, you can always plug in numbers and see.
Pretend they're equal, is that what you said?
Yep. So you start with them being equal. Q equals D. Which side do we add 8? Or to which side do we add 8? Daniel Stowe.
Q. Yeah, Q. You add 8 to Q.
QR.
Q.
I will allow you one more try.
You add 8 to D.
Why?
Oh.
Let's try out some numbers. If you have 2 dimes, how many quarters do you have?
I have 2 times how many quarters do I have? You'll have 8 quarters.
There's 8 more quarters than dimes. So if I have 2 dimes, how many quarters do I have?
Oh, so you have 2 times you have 20 cents.
I don't care about it. I have 8 more quarters than dimes.
it
Okay, let me draw a picture. Here are 2 dimes. How many quarters do I have? Do not write work. I have 8 more quarters than dimes.
Right.
There's 8 more. How many quarters do I have?
More quarters. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So bad at that.
No. No, you are not.
You got this now, I believe in you. Come on, baby.
Okay. Start with 8. What does more mean?
More.
Add, subtract, multiply, divide.
You add.
Okay. So 8 plus the number of dimes. How many dimes do I have?
You have 2 dimes.
So 8 added to 2 is
10.
10. Awesome. Good. So that's fine. Most of you didn't know which side to add 8 to anyway. So that's right. Yeah, exactly. 50 shot. You have 8 more quarters than dimes. So if I plug in numbers just to check to make sure that's true, and I have a basic understanding of the English language,
Is mayonnaise
then if I have 2 dimes, I should have 10 quarters. So you can plug that in and check. Now, if I did it backwards, then I would notice that I have it wrong. So check that, because the temptation is to do Q plus 8 equals D, which would be incorrect, because then you would have 8 more dimes than quarters. So we'll add 8 there. Okay, that's our first equation. The next equation we have is the value equation. How do I find the value? Well, the value of a quarter is what, Ocampo?
25 cents.
So, if my number of quarters is Q, what's the value of all of my quarters?
25Q.
25Q is correct. So if I take the value of all my quarters, and we already said dimes is 10D, what does that equal, Kara? And no. So I'm adding the value, or how much my quarters are worth, to the value, or how much my dimes are worth. 445 is correct. So if I add the value of quarters plus the value of dimes, how much money they're worth, I should get the total amount of money that I have, which is 445. From there, can we solve?
Yes.
Yes. What's the best method to use? Sierra?
Substitution.
It's true. It's true. This time, since we already have Q solved for, it would be better to use substitution, even though we do not like substitution. It is not our favorite. It is the worst. It is terrible. It is nobody's favorite. As of this moment, I decree that nobody will have substitution in my classroom as their favorite. It's actually so much worse. And until you realize that, you will have a real hard time. I got in a battle with a student earlier today. He had to solve 3 equations in 3 variables, and he refused to use elimination. And so he took up this whole board doing his problem, in which I did it in like 3 steps. So he wouldn't do elimination. Poor guy. Anyways, so from here we can use substitution. Q equals D plus 8. So I will plug that in for Q. So I have 25 times, parentheses, D plus 8 plus 10D equals 445. And I can solve for D. Go ahead and do that on your papers, and I will circulate. Once you have the correct answer for D and Q, you will be permitted to begin your homework. Remember that tomorrow is the exam, so you will need to prepare for that.